All right, the recording is on, and welcome everyone to the Get Started portion of our Overcoming Inbox Overwhelm seminars. Thank you for being with us today. We have a small group and we are recording this for posterity. There have not been any questions submitted online as of yet, so we're going to go with any questions that come in the room. I will be spending a little bit of time covering the concepts, and then we'll get into any questions, or if it's not a question, maybe it's just how do we translate this to the work that you guys are doing and what your inboxes look like. So again, we're going to do just a... Ooh. Shh. It's crazy that automatically the volume automatically starts on those. So let me see if I can do that. So the again, if you're just getting started in the program, please make sure that you've gone through each one of the steps. We have the Overcoming Inbox Overwhelm teaser. We have the steps in Get Clean and the steps in Get Organized. We did have a webinar last week that we recorded on Get Organized that provided even more content. And go back. All right, so again, that's me. You guys are going to see me live and in person. And again, any other tech questions that you guys have, we certainly will have time for at the end as well. The step that we're working on right now is the prioritization step, the Get Started part. This Get Streamlined is what's going to come next week, and that's going to be just all these little snippets and tricks and things like that, including that idea of rules for your inbox as well. So the idea here is that we are going to work on, once you've indicated that your Respond folder is the place where you're going to go do the work, the challenge becomes, okay, now it's all in my Respond folder. Where the heck do I start? And I know I spend a bunch of time scrolling to figure out what is the most urgent and what is the most important, and how do you do that on a regular basis? So the technique that we're going to go through is how do you use flags to determine your due dates, which is your urgency level, and then categories to determine the importance, which is your priority, right? So then we're going to be working primarily when we start in this space of urgent and important. And that's where we should be spending the most of our time. So I did include a how-to video in the PowerPoint that we put together and sent out in that video. Now from here, we're going to spend some time actually looking at my Respond folder. And guess what? This totally needs to be a judgment-free zone, because everything that has been happening in the last week means my Respond folder is now at 91 items, which is not what my preference is. But I have spent a lot of time going through and putting those flags on because I wanted it to look so good for you guys when I was doing this, which means the flags are indicating the, oops, hold on, let me make sure I'm sharing this part of my screen. Hold on, I think it might have just been sharing the PowerPoint, so I want to make sure you're seeing that. Okay, so the flags are actually indicating the importance of things, or the urgency. Flags are urgency, categories are importance. So let's just ask, I'm going to come back to the group for just a second. When we're talking about these things, how many times have you been in a situation where you've added flags for stuff, and you now, if you click flags and start looking at where your flags land, you just have all of these old flags hanging out, and you want to clear them so you can start fresh. How many of you have a bunch of old flags hanging out? Say me if you have a bunch, put it in chat. Yep, Diamond does. I understand the feeling. Bunch of old flags hanging out. Okay, Jessica has a few, thank you, fair enough. Anybody else have a lot of old flag messages and you're like, oh, I was just flagging them because at the time they were important and I wanted to pay attention to that, but now they don't matter as much anymore. So what happens with your flagged messages? Got it. I saw you, Michael and Teresa. Thanks for your responses there. What happens with your flagged messages is they, behind the scenes, are headed over to your task list. And so what that means is, first of all, the first place to look for your task list could be right here. Okay, so this little guy right here. is your task icon. If you don't see him, and otherwise it might say tasks, depending on how you have that part set up. But if you don't see him, go to the 3 dots, which is your more options, and then you should have the option to have it there. Okay, and if you'd rather have icons, you can go to where it says navigation options and change it from compact navigation to add that feature or not. That's what changes it from the words to actually the icons. So when you hover over this, it gives you the official Microsoft word for it is it's called a peek. And when you have a peek, you can just hover over it rather than navigate over to tasks. And from here, you can look at all your tasks. Look, now mine right now are sorted by category, but you can also arrange that by start date or due date. And if there's questions as we're going through, go ahead and ask, because when I'm showing my screen like this, I can't see the chat the same way. So please feel free to jump in and ask a question if you have it. Okay, so that's where flags start to land. And if you have flags that are past due, they show up in red font. And if you have things that are due, like right now, they show up in black font. Okay, the amount of color in your red indicates like how soon they're due. So you can see I have stuff for today, I have stuff for tomorrow, next week, etc., etc. All right. So that's what we have landing over here. Now, I don't mind the peek. It's not a bad place for it. But the other option that I have, nope, go back, is over here. I like to have this whole to-do bar area set up. I call this like my dashboard or mission control when I'm looking at my email, because I can see it all in one place. Now, some people don't like this. They don't like it because it takes up extra screen real estate that, depending on how big your screen is, that real estate can be very valuable. So it's up to you if you want that over there. To get it, you go to the View tab, come on over to the to-do bar, and I like to turn my calendar and my tasks on. That's, again, just a personal preference, but those are my suggestions with that. So again, from here, I can look at things and how they're organized. I discourage the no date. I'll explain to you why I have that in a little bit. So I have things for today, tomorrow, etc. So this is what happens when you flag something. I'm thinking I might have heard a question, so I'm going to pop back over and see what we have. Do we have a question? Comment, thought, concern? Anybody before I keep going? All right, let's keep going. So when we flag something, if you just click on the flag, it automatically lands in your today area. It shows that it's due today and it automatically lands there. Something to keep in mind with that is that if you're on your mobile device and you flag something, your only option is that it's going to flag for today. Okay, so just keep that in mind, that when you're in your regular inbox, right, and when you're in your regular inbox and you go in on your mobile device and you just go to hit flag, your only option is that you're either flagging it or unflagging it. You can't set a date. But when you're on your computer, you can right click on that. And now you can say, but when is this really due? So do I really need to look at it today, or is it more of a tomorrow thing? So our options here are today, tomorrow, this week, which puts it to this Friday, next week, which puts it to next Friday, or you can go to no date. Again, don't recommend that, or put a custom date in. When a message is completed, what you don't want to do is you don't want to come over here and hit delete. Okay, when you're done with it, you do not want to delete it from your task list. You have two options from getting it off your list. You can just left click on the flag, which then marks it as complete. You can right click on it and either do mark as complete or clear the flag. So here's one of the reasons why I recommend that if you get the chance, mark it as complete, because later when we get into your task area, you actually can see all of your completed tasks. And for some people who like checking things off the checklist, that feels really good. They love that feeling. So again, flags are meant for urgency. We're using them when we right click on that and we add that flag. Come on, I'm gonna clear the flag. Clear it. There we go. We add the flag and then you want to select when you need to pay attention to it. This is part of the process of kind of putting things on autopilot. So later you don't have to scroll for things. But again, if you start to look at my tasks, if I got behind on stuff, we'll go back and peek at it. If we got behind on stuff here, and now I have a couple days worth of stuff piled up and I have all my fresh new stuff, all of a sudden it gets really overwhelming and we're back to that unnecessary scrolling for what to do next. So I'd like to add one more visual cue that we can use for this. And the cue I like to use is the categories. Now, categories are not available on your mobile device. So that is a downside to this. And if that's something that you're doing a lot of, then we need to come up with a different tool for you to do that. What's important to look at though, is when you go to categorize your message. There's all sorts of categories. You may even have some categories that have already been set out for you. My key ones that I use for this are high, medium, and low. And I use a red to indicate that it's high priority. Now, with a combination of a today flag and a red category, that now kind of mentally floats that topic to the top. Okay, so now my amount of scrolling gets a lot smaller and I know where to get in and get focused to get my stuff done. So when we do that, you can do, again, you can set your categories. By default, they're actually going to be named purple category, yellow category, blue category. You can come on into where it says all categories. You can rename any category you want. You can make a new category. They actually have 25 different colors that can be used for categories. So keep in mind, like that's something to think about. I use the green category to mean two different things for me. This was just for the sake of an example. But for me, on my calendar, the green category actually means it's work. And that's because I'm going to make money. So I put something in green for money. And on my email, that same green category, it just means low priority. So I have it out here more than once because I wanted to just give it different meanings. You can have a lot of different categories. I do encourage simpler is better. Don't make it too many levels of complication. However, if you guys, I'm going to come back to a question on this. We're going to throw this out. We're going to talk about different types of categories once I finish this explanation. So we'll unmute or go to chat for this next part. One of my thoughts was, if you guys are trying to figure out how to batch your activity together, would it be helpful for you to have a category, for example, of like appraisal? And that is a status. And that if you wanted to mark something with an appraisal status, keep in mind, you can have more than one category on a message. So now if I were to sort this is my respond folder by categories, and I wanted to just spend a moment looking through everything with the blue category, which is again my appraisal category. If that's what I wanted to dig through right here, that would be in a batch where I could find them all at once. So I'm going to turn off the screen for just a second, come back to you guys and just talk through this idea of categories, who's using them, how are they working, you know, suggestions for categories and things like that. So topic is categories. People, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Hey, this is Jen.
Hi.
Hi, I think something that you brought up that was really important is that the high, medium, low for urgency. I think I have gone in a bad direction of being too specific with just even labeling and then just like being all over the place with those categories. And I really like your idea. So I think I'm going to try to incorporate that of just a generalized, it's easier to think about because already it's overwhelming in my head of being so specific about every one of those categories. So that's my 2 cents.
I love it. So you basically, it was almost like that idea when we talked earlier about how many mini folders can we have, like get down to the smallest detail for filing. And sometimes it would be helpful to just have it cycle up. But the thing to keep in mind with that, let's see, go back to my screen here, sorry. The thing to keep in mind with it also is that you can have more than one category per message. So if I go back now and I sort by flag, you know, if it's helpful, again, think about broader categories. And maybe it's hey, this again, appraiser or things like that. If there's anything that you typically would be doing in a batch activity, that may be something that, again, you're kind of thinking more, what are some of my macro levels versus your micro levels? I don't think more categories is best. I think there are people who I've seen who do over categorize, and then that just gets a little bit confusing. But if you look at the things of what's my urgency, what's my importance, and then is there a broad category I can put it in, that will help when you're sorting through stuff and saying, oh, I wonder what's going on with all these appraisals, or I wonder what's going on with all of this inspection, or whatever that is. Perhaps there's a way to look at that. So great, thank you for the feedback on that. Let's keep talking about categories for a second though. What are you guys currently using and what's working and what might you do differently? Teresa, I don't know how you can use them in your life yet, but chime in, maybe we'll come up with something. So, okay, they should be able to be used with time blocking. Now, if you can, because I know you have children in the background, as we're all dealing with right now. If you can jump on and talk, though, let's go ahead and do that, because part of me says, what do your time blocks look like? Because if you come up with your category system that you're already putting with your emails based on your time blocking, there's actually some magic that could probably happen there. So what are some of the key time blocks? Because I guess my question is, if based on what I've seen in your emails, is your time block really working on I'm going through all of the active loans closing within the next week, block 1. And then I'm looking at everybody else that's 2 weeks out. Because if that's the case, that's just a time thing. And if you use those search folders like we showed with Michael's suggestions on that, I don't know that you need to micromanage that more. So tell me.
Well, so my thought is that if I can categorize them as, so because I don't do any time blocking now, that's something I definitely need to work on. But if I can time block, this section is going to be for in-process files, this is going to be for new applications, and then this is going to be prospecting time, I can categorize those and then use that as a batch function to move ahead.
Do those come in as separate email messages, or like, let's use prospecting as one of the questions. And I tossed a question out to the group in chat saying, like, if you are doing time blocking, what are some of the categories, not in your email, but in your calendar, that you're using for time blocking? So let's just take, for example, prospecting. Is that actually happening in email? What do those email messages look like?
So for me, as Michael's assistant, so he oftentimes will send out an introduction and introduce me by email. And I like to respond to that and be like, yeah, hey, I'm here. Michael's not just making me up, I promise. That way they know that they can reach out for questions. And, it's just another touch on that file. That stuff doesn't take a whole lot of time. Or let's say that I've got, someone who's emailing back and forth. That would be a prospecting time too.
Okay. Michael, I'm going to ask you, and then if you're not able to jump on, that's okay. But I'll ask Teresa as well. Are you guys using Quick Steps for some of those introductory emails?
My guess is Teresa doesn't have that set up on hers. We actually try to keep our template. We have a template that's a Google Doc essentially that's set up as an outline, so that she can just click the spot she wants to copy that. Because with QuickTemp, the templates are constantly and being updated and being refined. and none of that stuff is cloud-based in Outlook.
Perfect. Brilliant response, right on track. So I will still show the quick steps feature when we get into the streamlining. But what you just explained about why you would or would not use it is brilliant. And so you've explored it and looked for another option. Perfect. Very good. So, okay, so this with Teresa, with the messages from prospecting and then that response, and then if stuff is going back and forth, where do you store those messages right now?
If they have applied and I have an active file going, I have made a folder in my email. And then I will manually put it in there. I used to have rules set up to move them, but then I got overwhelmed by making sure that I was in each of those folders addressing what was sorted automatically.
So what if instead, so this is the question, is like, where is that stuff landing? And like, when you're time blocking, where would you go do it? Remember when I put, and I don't know if you didn't see it, that's fine. But one of the things that I put together for myself was a schedule 101, schedule one-on-one folder. Because that was something that I wanted to batch do, and I didn't want it hanging out in my inbox. And it's something that I go in once a week, and I go in and do it, and then they go where they need to go. And I wonder if with prospect stuff, that when Michael has sent the email out and you've responded, that actually should somehow, whether you're manually moving it or we figure some other way for that it gets into possibly just a general prospect folder that you can give your love and attention to during your time block. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So you don't, and then once they have converted to that they've done an application, you can actually do a search in your prospect folder, grab everything that was related to them, move that to their application folder, or, well, no, move it
Set
to
up a search folder.
Right. And actually, I don't even know how much you really need to move it, except I would move it from whatever you have as your prospect to maybe your in process. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so that means that when you go to spend your time doing the prospecting, you're focusing on just people who are in that folder, but that's still in general a processing folder for you. It's not really a storage folder.
True.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I'm not saying you can't use the categories with it. I think you could, but if I'm looking for a visual way to work through my process and keep my inbox cleaned out and know when I've time blocked that I'm going right here. I'm just going to this place, and that's where everything related to that one task lives. That might serve you.
That makes sense.
Thank you for asking the question, though. I'm open to, we have a few other people on the line and love to hear, what we just worked through is the urgency, which is setting the flags, and then the idea of the importance, which is you, again, I'm going to put my visual back on for just a second. The idea here is that once you've moved something to respond, that you have a visual clue immediately. So like I said, I did get behind with all the crazy that's been going on this last week, but that you have a very clear visual that I can say, oh, this is what I said I needed to do today. This is red, and this is today. I should do this one, right? It just gives you a different way to look at what needs to be getting done. And I want you to feel like you can do that in a way that's more autopilot, so that eliminates a lot of the scrolling, and you know that you've put it where it belongs. Okay, I'm going to come back and we'll chat just a little bit more, and then we'll take you through any of the other questions that you guys have on this. What are some other categories, either categories that you guys are using right now or categories that you think you might use, like that appraisal one? And again, maybe that would work, maybe it wouldn't. And then the other question is, what are you guys using for some of your time block categories?
I can share my time block categories. Really, I don't use categories for anything but time blocking.
Yeah.
It's really, and it's mainly just for color, so I can look at it quickly to see whether it's a phone call, a
Yep.
face-to-face, branch management related versus versus sales, that kind of stuff. So it's really just to be able to quickly look and see how much time I'm sitting in the chair or how much I'm out and about. But I use a lot of the colors, like a green, for example, like you said, for what you use it for in your calendar. Mine would be similar, but it's gonna be a face-to-face meeting. But then I'll tell on the side whether it's in the office or out of the office based on the color, whether it's showing away or in office.
Got it. Perfect. So the interesting part there is that, so phone call. So I wonder, Michael, based on the business you're in, again, of course, do you use your calendar to track some of your activity? Because I know you're really data driven.
No, I don't use my calendar for any of that. We use our lead management system to track most of that.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to double check on before I went down a path that wasn't necessary.
Now that might not be the case for other branches though, because our branch has a system that our branch cost covers, like it's part of our expenses that manages that activity. So we might be different in some areas than others.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So not everybody's going to have access to that particular tool.
Got it. So again, for some people, depending on how you track your types of activities, if you're doing that stuff on your calendar, and you can use categories on your calendar to track blocks of time and stuff, that can give you some data that may be helpful if it's not being tracked in your lead management system. So just something out there, and that may be a point of further discussion outside of this training, but just something to keep in mind. Other thoughts or questions? Now, as we look at the content for, and if there are any questions related to past content as well, you're welcome to ask that. But the idea, again, what we're really going for is building from step 1, which was getting clean. And that was saying our inbox is no longer full of stuff, and therefore it's all landing in, anything that we need to take action on is landing in our respond folder. And then step 2, being really clear about whether we are deleting or delegating or deferring or doing or directing. Step 3 is then, okay, great, I've gotten those first 2 steps done. Now it's all landing in this respond folder. And where do I even start? So I'm not scrolling through, like right now, my 90 messages in there to determine what needs to get done. And then the next step that we're going to get to next week is going to be about streamlining some of those steps. So that's kind of where we've landed so far. But Michael, I think you had also mentioned that, when we put those search folders in place for you guys, that there was you guys are putting, if you are going through every one of those messages and tagging them with the flags and the categories, your task list looks ridiculously overwhelming. And truly all you're really trying to do is work on this one file, or work on, that particular loan, or work on all of your in process or things like that. So what's been your middle ground solution to manage these little tasks that do come up that don't necessarily belong to a particular file versus, yeah, go ahead, please.
It's the respond folder.
Okay. So
most of those little things can just be done in a matter of minutes, or I'm going to put it on my calendar for in a time that I have blocked to do whatever that might be related to.
Got
if it's a prospecting related item or something like that.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
If it's a prospecting related time, task that I have to do, I might put it there. If it's a working on my business task for growing the branch, those kinds of things I'd block that time for Thursdays, for example, because that's what I do on Thursdays. So I would put it as however much time I need on the calendar to get the job done.
So when you think about your respond folder right now, because again, you have other activities with the loans in process and prospecting and things like that. But let's just say for the build your business, if you have time blocked on your calendar, do you have something that corresponds with it for everything that's in the respond folder that you want to try to be tackling during that time? Is that how you're associating those?
No, not necessarily. I mean, a lot of those things are little that I can just knock out while I'm taking care of the respond folder. So I don't, but I'm not dealing with a lot of the loan level stuff. I mean, if it's a loan level thing for me, it's a problem file, whereas Teresa's managing it if it's just a general loan task.
Got it. So when we think about like Teresa's load of, doing a lot of that processing, and Teresa, if you have thought about like what that time blocking looks like for you, and I don't want to put you on the spot because I know you're working on this. I'm hoping we can actually help support you, and there might be ideas from some of the other people. What are Michael gave some time block categories of things that he's working on, like in his business or marketing or things like that. What are the big categories about that you want to use for time blocking?
Well, for me, it would be, some time spent on in process, some time spent on, the pending applications. We'll say like getting loan interviews done and collecting documents. Time blocking for making calls is going to be really important. We have, with how crazy it's been, that hasn't been happening the way it should be. So, I mean, certainly I think if I can batch some of those tasks that are in the email, rather than, again, using my email as my kind of to go and do list, there's just a lot of balls in the air, and I'm taking all of this in, and I can't wait to start putting changes into place.
Well, and at this point, we've gotten the whole system out there. So, I mean, we did it in little segments, but now by the time that you've hit here, the whole system is out there. What's going to get added on next is how do we automate and streamline and speed up some of these things? So that's what we talk about next week, is all of those different options for just if it's something that you're sending out regularly, how do we make that simple for you? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now I want to actually see if I can show you, just using my screen here, what this Microsoft To Do looks like, because I'm loving it. And then it's also like messing with my demo for you guys. And here's why. What's going on is I recently added Microsoft To Do. It is an app. It is not a desktop application. It is an app. And there's some things that I really like about it, and there's some things that I'm really learning about it. So let me just see. Nope, I think we got total glare on this. Ooh, it's not too bad. So
you got it.
You see how you have the My Day part starting up top?
Yeah.
Okay, and then you'll see as we go through. Okay, Michael, you used it for a bit. I'll look forward to your feedback on it. So you're also going to see in there that it pulls my flagged messages. So I actually can go in there and look at my flagged emails, which for me, if I'm trying to manage stuff on the go, this is helpful. But then down below there are actually like groups of tasks. So I can go up towards the top where you're looking right now. You'll see one of the bottom things in that first half is called tasks. I can add a single task here and there, and it's literally just clicking on the tasks, and I can add the plus button down here, type it in, add a due date, etc. So that's where I can do some single tasks. However, this stuff down below, I'll give it a minute to focus, is what I'm really beginning to love, because it's different. It's a different level of projects for me. So as an example, I have my leader one stuff out there, and one task under there, then I said was like record the next video. And then the next task is upload the next video. And it gives me all of my deadlines in more of a micro view of that. And I can have all of these different task lists all in one. And then when I open up one of those tasks, let's see what we have here. Oh, look, my live webinar today is already crossed off. So I can look at one of those tasks. And then you can also see an option right there where it would say, put it to my day. And that starts to build my daily task list. Now, all in all, I think this is good. It's good. It's not great, but it's a good tool. The reason that I have though all of these projects or these tasks in my Outlook that have no date is because, for example, I have schedule one-on-ones. These are people that I know I want to schedule one-on-ones with. However, I'm not putting a date to get it scheduled out there. I just know that once a week I need to go in and schedule one-on-ones. So I wasn't trying to micromanage that. And then they show up under no date, and that looks a little bit overwhelming for me. But if you're looking for a place to keep track of all of the stuff, and you're not, so the reason why this is because on my phone, in my Outlook app, there is no task list. There's no place in there that I can just go and add my own tasks. A flagged message will always show up, but no separate task management. So that's why I started using To-Do. And again, I like it. I don't love it, but it's a decent enough solution for me for right now. Michael, what was your experience? What worked for you and what didn't?
Thank you so much. It was similar to that. Okay, that's fine. It was similar to that, what you had seen, but really what we were where my challenge seemed to come into was the team management piece of it. In fact, after our last call, we've since implemented Planner on Teams, Teresa and I have. So we were using an old Google Sheet for it. But the problem that we were dealing with tasks was neither of us really knew what the other person was doing. You can just give me all four. That's okay. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day. Neither of us knew exactly what the other person was always doing. And so we ran into all sorts of challenges that way with, not knowing what was going on, what the little tasks were, who was taking care of what client and whatnot. So with Planner, we can see all that. So it was really good to be able to add tasks and kind of manage tasks in Outlook if you're only managing your own tasks. But as soon as you start to being involved in collaboration and team-oriented stuff, tasks inside of Outlook became very difficult because you could only see your own tasks and tasks you had assigned, not all tasks for each user.
Agree. So especially for those of you who are using Planner in any way, and if we need to have a separate conversation on Planner, or if you need a quick demo of that, I can bring one up. But here's the thing. One of the things I love about Planner is I can like micro any of my projects. I can take one project, if we had a website design or something like that my business would be working on, I can take that one project and break it down into all the different steps and assign it to different people. But if I have multiple projects that I've been assigned to or that I'm in charge of, I have to go out to my own Planner app to see them all brought together. What I do like about this is that if you see on here, it'll take a second for it to focus. Come on, there we go. Get a little better light. There is something that says assigned to me or assigned to you. That's actually pulling my tasks right from Planner. So there's an integration that happens, and it does not show you all of Planner. You can jump on your phone and go into the Planner app and see all the Planner stuff, but it does show you anything that should be on your to-do list based on what you've been assigned in Planner. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm actually loading it right now, but of course I got to plug in my password and get the two-step authentication going. But I haven't actually looked at To-Do since we started the Planner thing. So sure. It does make sense.
Love it. Okay, so those are a few features. Again, the goal here was to take you all the way through. So we have now hit to like that end point of saying you've gotten clean, your inbox should be cleaned out, and you know how to do that. And if you need to do a quick re-clean, go for it. Then we got the process on getting organized. So you know the steps in the workflow and where it goes, and you know the difference between processing and storage. Now the get started goes back to your processing, and you would create your habits. You're creating your habits for how often you're checking your waiting folder. You're creating your habit for how often you're checking maybe your read review folder, or I'm making a habit around how often I check my schedule one-on-one folder. And then everything else we're doing is routine happening in the respond folder using the categories and using the flags. So we have a clear visual indicator of where to start, or at least it narrows down the list from here to here of what we need to scroll through about where to start. So That's the goal, is clean up a lot of that clutter physically as well as in your brain, so you're not spending all that time wondering and wandering. Does that help?
Very much. Thank you.
You bet. So let me do a quick temperature check. We only have a few people on the call right now, and you are not required to disclose, right? But if you wanted to, so we have Tanya, Teresa, Susie, Michael, Jessica, and Diamond. Tell me where you're at with the process. I've heard from I've heard from Michael, and I've heard from Susie, and I had a quick talk offline. So Susie, if you don't want to jump on that, that's okay. Teresa, we know where you're at. But what about the rest of you? What's been, the one thing either getting in your way from implementing or that's really been helping you move forward? Susie, did you have a thought?
Nope, I'm good.
Hey there, I just think I struggle with being consistent with it. Like I'm good with, starting the flags, and then I think adjusting, because I think in my world, in my role, some of those urgencies become not so urgent, and then especially like this week, everything is just kind of like, oh, slow down, back burner. And so going back through that, and everything is still flagged red versus, okay, maybe I can adjust those flags, adjust those colors, take them down to that maybe green low level. So something I definitely need to look at of just how do I stay up to date, and how can I just stay current with every task changing?
Yeah, that's good comments, Diamond. Thank you. Because things have changed. And I think, one of the productivity tips that I've heard in general is to get to a point that at the end of the day, you're taking the last 10, 15 minutes at the end of the day to like take a quick review and make sure that you're ready to go, start fresh the next day. And that might be the time to go back and review your flags and review your categories and just reassess. And some people actually, let's say we work till 4 or 5. Some people do that review about an hour before the end of the workday rather than the last 15 minutes of the day. Because if they do it the last 15 minutes of the day, they often find that they're working more frenzied to get more stuff done. Whereas if they do it about an hour before the end of the day, they're able to say, okay, these things can't wait. I still have to accomplish those yet today, but I know that we're ready to go for tomorrow because I've set my priorities. So those are a couple pro tips related to the productivity side of things, that if you really can schedule a brief daily review about an hour before the end of your day, you may be able to reset all of those things rather than come in the next day and kind of go, okay, where are we now? Because things are changing really quickly. We had comments from Jessica and Tanya in the chat. So Jessica said, I've created more folders and cleared my inbox. Whew. Truthfully, I don't get nearly as many emails as most of these guys, so it's not as bad for me. Well, I'm glad to hear that, Jessica. And clearing out your inbox can feel like a nice fresh start too, so that's great. And Tanya said, it's been very freeing to move things to a 2-file folder so it doesn't clog up my inbox. Yep, if you're able to just store that stuff, and really, I'll go back to if you didn't get a chance to fully watch the live webinar that we did last week, watch that part on search folders, because what Michael has really shown is that you can keep a lot of stuff in one main storage folder, keeping it super simple and using your search folders as your way to get all of the stuff in one place. Yeah, if you get a chance, Jessica, I highly encourage you to start using those search folders, and Tanya as well. And the other part is, once a file is closed, you can just remove the search folder. Like once the whole thing is done, remove the search folder and you haven't lost any of the messages. So it doesn't have to stay front of mind all the time if you use that process and you're not searching through, hey, where is everything? All right. Any other closing thoughts, comments, or questions based on the information that we've covered so far in the Get Started section? All right. So please keep in mind that the topics that we have coming up next when it comes to the Get Streamlined, we're going to talk more about rules. I did actually post a bonus video in the video library that we have for you guys, just about how to separate out all the coronavirus updates into its own folder so that you guys I'm not saying that they should auto delete at all. I'm just saying that I was getting them from Fresh Time and First Watch and all these other things that it's nice to know, but I don't need that in my work email inbox. So I just set up a rule for updates and they all land there first. And then as I need to, I'll go take a look at them. So that would be my one tip about keeping your inbox safe from coronavirus, so that we can stay focused and serving the people that we need to serve. Otherwise, I will sign off for today. This video will be posted in the YouTube channel as well. So please, if you guys have any questions or need anything in the meantime, you know where to find me, and we'll have a new video out on Monday. Thanks, everybody.